this is my final interview, and been really looking forward to this. And I was thinking, how does one sort of introduce the next speaker? It's a bit of a tough one, really, because a lot has been said about the man already. But Lakshmi this morning said something that gave me a little angle. She said, when she was talking about corporate responsibility and change, she said corporates are the new Medicis. Do you remember that? And in a way, we have quite an empire builder in advertising who we're about to speak to. And yet, you may not realize this, it all began with the male menopause. Did you know that? It did. At least that was the joke that Sir Martin told me when I first met him about 13 or 14 years ago. It was the andropause at the age of 40 that led him to leave Saatchi & Saatchi, and in 1985 to buy a strange little company in the north of England called Wire and Plastic Products. In 1987, just 2 years after buying that investment vehicle, WPP acquired J. Walter Thompson for $566 million. In 1988, they listed on the NASDAQ. In 1989, quite famously now in global industry, Martin led the bid for Ogilvy and acquired that business for over $800 million. In the same year, 1989, WPP had its first board meeting in China, really marking that business out as one of the most progressive, internationally expansive marketing services companies. So the signs were there all those years ago. And that was I've just described just the first 4 years of the journey. I'm not going to describe any more, but perhaps Sir Martin Sorrell has done more than anyone to establish advertising as a respected business, not necessarily as the amateurish profession that it may well have been in the days of Mad Men. A professional business, not just in the minds of global industry and other corporates, but in the minds of the advertising industry itself, to realize that its place in the global economy. And a few days ago, WPP reported its 2012 results, and it was another record year for the company. Revenues up 3.5% to 10.4 billion pounds sterling, and profits up to about 1.1 billion, up 8%, consolidating WPP's position as the world's largest marketing services conglomerate. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sir Martin Sorrell.
Thank you, Charlie. That was an awfully long introduction, Charlie. There's no time for an interview.
Okay, we've
finished.
Well,
and
it's the only way.
I hate the word conglomerate.
It's the only way. It's the only way I'm going to get a word in this interview. I thought at least I'll just get the words out the way for 5 minutes.
We'll start and finish that way.
Okay. So let's just turn to your results first. You said in the press when the results released that you got there ugly,
right?
In terms of just scraping to your targets. What did you mean by that?
When we sort of drafted that, or I like to draft those things myself. And the members of the board thought that was a little bit extreme. And I thought it was rather good, actually. So anyway, and the fact that you picked up on it makes it even better. Well, by ugly, I mean it was difficult. So 2012, everything didn't go the way that we sort of intentioned, although we got there in the end. But in 2011, I think we fired, if not on all cylinders, I would say most of them. So in fact, you can see it. I know it's controversial to talk about incentives and all that sort of stuff and compensation, but if you look at it, because we are the only group that disclose actually what we pay people in incentives. It's interesting that nobody else does, and one always wonders why they don't, but they don't. And we show our margins before incentives and after it. And you can see it quite clearly, because at maximum performance we paid 20%, and in 2011 we paid about 19.5%. This is of operating profits before bonuses. And last year, the year that you mentioned, 2012, we paid about 16.5%. So we hit targets rather than the maxima. And the reasons, are quite clear. The mature markets, Western Europe and the United States were under more pressure. The fast-growing markets grew faster.
Yep.
I hate using the word emerging markets because I think it's insulting, for example, to the Chinese to say to them that they're an emerging market when they're already the second largest market in the world.
And the third largest market by revenue for WPP now.
Yes, the third by revenue after the US and the UK. So digital obviously grew faster than the average. Advertising and media investment management, particularly media planning and buying, what we call media investment management, grew faster than the average. So the year was a sort of strange one. We over-invested in people late 2011, going into 2012. We budgeted 4% like-for-like, and as you said, our reported sterling went against us in the sense that it strengthened, although it's now weakened. So this year will be better for us in terms of currency headwinds or tailwinds. There won't be headwinds. But basically, our like-for-like growth was 2.9% for the year. We've budgeted 4. Q1, we were up 4. Q2, it went to 3. Q3 to 2. And then in Q4, we did slightly better. We were up 2.5%.
A few of the city analysts are thinking 4 is still a little bit of a large growth. They think you might be being a little over-optimistic like you were.
Yes,
sort of this time last year.
We started at 4. Actually, the end of Q1 last year, about this time last year, we were feeling a bit bullish. And we didn't say how much more. We thought we would grow by 4, but we thought we'd do a little bit better, and we were wrong. But on the profitability side and margin side, we overhired. So our headcount actually for the year was flat. So we go into 2013. I don't want to sound overly bullish, but we go into 2013 feeling quite good about the way the business is balanced. And I know this is people think that you referred to Mad Men days and Don Draper, and I think we are still Mad Men, but we are also maths men, if you want to put it. I like that sort of balance. Our business is no longer just an art; it's a science as well. Whether traditional people like that or not. So getting the balance right between art and science and maths and Mad Men is, I think, critical. But the balance in our business is very good at the moment. I feel good about it, because we started towards the end of last year to get more balance into the headcount versus revenue growth.
And you've been notorious for reading the economic situation with some wonderfully beautiful metaphors.
Beautiful.
The bath-shaped recovery, love,
yes.
And all the
spectacular stuff.
Where are we? Are we in a bath at the moment? Are we in a love?
No, we're wrestling. We're wrestling with grey swans. That's the latest. The latest iterations. 4.
Yeah. So
yes,
4,
but
4
David Cameron gave us a 5th. So the 4 before the EU referendum on Britain's staying in the EU, which may happen in 2016-17. There were 4. The first was the Eurozone.
Yep.
And Mario Draghi has not solved that, but he's sort of at least put off the evil day or balanced things, although we have the Italian election and we have the corruption issues in Spain, although that doesn't look as though it'll derail things. That was number 1. Number 2 was Middle East, and the grey swans have got blacker in the Middle East. I mean, the Middle East really does worry me. I was in Washington with the Business Council, which is the sort of, there are 2, there's the Business Roundtable in the US and the Business Council. So these are the largest companies in America. And listening to the administration, and we get a good access to the administration, talk about the potential problems in Iran, North Korea, but the Iranian stuff was pretty frightening.
They're very worried about the oil price in America, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's the Iranian nuclear position that is almost unstoppable in many respects. One hopes that sanctions will work, because certainly an Israeli attack or an American attack may not be on the nuclear installations may not be successful. So it's inevitable in many people's minds the Iranians will have a nuclear capability in the Middle East, which will lead to proliferation. So that's a big issue. The third issue would be China hard soft landing. I think that's off the agenda. We've been saying for 2 years that the 12th five-year plan talked about higher quality, lower quantum growth in China. I arrived here this morning, turn on CNBC, and that's what they're talking about. So finally, we're all woken up to the fact that the Chinese, a state-directed economy, state-directed capitalism works, and I think will work to an increasingly intensified degree, and it goes back to 1989, as you graciously pointed out. So, and the 12th five-year plan is about consumption rather than savings, about our healthcare, social security, safety net, and it's about service businesses, all of which was repeated on CNBC today, all of which we've been talking about for 2 or 3 years. So I think hard soft landing is off the agenda. That applies also to Brazil, India, and Russia. Not so much Brazil, because Brazil actually has fallen behind the UK again. Having surpassed us in football, they then surpassed us in
we might come on to
in terms of
Ronaldo.
GNP. Well, Ronaldo is another issue. Yes, my apprentice.
Yeah, we might get. We might come to that.
But
Not
anyways,
in football, I hasten to add. He's rubbish at football.
China, hard soft landing. And then the final one is the elephant in the room, as we referred to it, which is the US deficit, which has not been solved. And we're in the midst of this sequester debate at the moment. And the fifth one is Cameron's EU.
But so aside from these swans, as nicely put, you feel pretty bullish about the global economy right now, then, obviously.
I don't feel bullish. I feel, listen, clients, you asked me about 2012 and why it was so difficult. Clients are very, very tough. I mean, I know we've got a number of clients in the room. I don't want to upset anybody who may be in the finance and procurement functions. After all, I'm an ex-CFO, so I'm probably more sensitive to it than most in some respects. But the balance of power inside companies has shifted, particularly since Lehman in September 2008. But you could track it back to the late 80s and 1990, because we actually haven't had much retail price inflation since 1990. But so pricing power amongst clients has been very limited. At the same time, retail has become more powerful. So Walmart, Tesco, Carrefour, although they all have their issues to deal with strategically, have become much more powerful. If you don't have the pricing power, the pressure is on the supply chain, particularly when commodity prices, although they've leveled off in the last year or two, commodity prices, if you look against on a 5-year trend basis, are up substantially. So margins have come under pressure for manufacturers, so they've squeezed the supply chain, of which we are a part.
Yeah.
Okay? And the rise of finance and procurement has been, I think, at the expense of marketing. As Jeremy Bullmore has pointed out ad nauseam for many years, there is a limit to what you can do on the cost side, a finite limit, whereas at least until you get to 100% market share, it's unlimited what you can do on the revenue side. The hope is that 2013 might mark a year when clients realize this and start to invest more in brand. I mean, basically, we have a situation where anybody running a major multinational will invest in the BRICS and Next 11, and they'll invest in capacity and behind brand. In the mature markets, they're taking capacity out or controlling it, and maybe investing in brand to maintain or increase market share. That's the reason it's so tough, I think.
Interesting you mentioned retailers, actually, in your response, because you've got these huge organizations like Amazon and Walmart, as you say, looking like they're getting into the content business.
Yeah.
In fact, many of these big retailers are beginning to describe themselves more as content companies.
Yeah.
Amazon, of course, is hugely powerful. I mean, do you see that trend becoming a potential threat to some of your operating companies at WPP in terms of disintermediation?
No, I don't. I mean, just one point on the retail side, which is interesting. It came up today whilst we were in Singapore. At the same time, you've got the growing global retailers, or retailers on a national basis. You've had the growth of proximity retailing, of local retailing. And this is going to pose some interesting challenges for the big box retailers, and indeed for manufacturers. And of course, give some added traction to local manufacturers who generally have better distribution than big manufacturers, the multinational manufacturers. No, I don't see, if you're saying, we had to wrestle with the G word, 5 or 10 years ago, 5 years ago, analysts would say WPP's finished or our competitors are finished because of Google, right? And I'm not putting that to one side. I think Google is still a frenemy. I know that doesn't make some people happy saying that, but I'll say it again because I think it's true. And so there was the G word. Then it was the R word, with the recession killers, particularly after Lehman in 2008. Now, if you're suggesting the R word, retail, I don't think so. I think we can work very effectively with retailers. I mean, we have a very interesting stake in two companies, both based in South Africa by coincidence. One is called Smollen, which specializes in in-store distribution, massive, operates not just in South Africa, but operates in Asia, in China, in India, in Brazil, and also Barrows, which creates in-store environments for manufacturers, not just shelf wobblers.
Yep.
You know, I'm talking about really significant things. So I think we're playing a lot in the retail and shopper area. We're going to announce another initiative shortly, big initiative in shopper and activation. And so I think we are really getting to grips. You know, if you go, we have our Carl Hartman, who runs the Kimberly-Clark business for us, has also built this horizontal that we have in shopper marketing, and that's really interesting in terms of what our capabilities are in store. So I think retailers are very much partners. I mean, there could be some frenemy element to it as well in terms of content, but no, I think generally there are partnerships.
You've earmarked in your annual report 300 to 400 million pounds sterling in terms of for acquisitions. I assume shopper marketing and those elements are going to be increasing part of that, but what else? What are sort of things you look on the lookout for?
Well, you know, strategy is clear. It might be wrong, but it's clear. So new markets, bricks and next 11.
Did you just admit that you admit you might be wrong?
I've always admitted that, Charlie. It's just that you don't want to listen to that, so you missed it.
All right.
You don't take it all in. You know, you automatically think that the Burke is not going to say you could ever be wrong.
That's fine. That's fine.
So I've always said, you know, our strategy is simple. It might be wrong. I've always said that, but it's new markets, so it's bricks and next 11. It's new media. Digital, in all its guises. So it's not just search, it's the 5 legs of Google. I mean, Google is an incredibly, I think, sophisticated, and although it's in 5 areas, focused organization, I would say even more so since Larry Page has become CEO. So it's not just search, it's display, it's video, it's social, and it's mobile. And the Motorola Mobility acquisition, I think, has enabled them to understand both software and hardware, whether it's Android and handsets, much better than the competition. Facebook's issue is it's rooted in social, it's trying to get into mobile and other areas. My view is it should relax. It is a different form of communication.
Back to Google. You know, that's, I guess your market cap now, you're probably trading on what?
20.5 billion.
Oh, 20 and a half?
20 and a half
So trading on what, 15?
14 times.
14 times earnings. Mm-hmm. Google will be trading probably 25, 20.
No. It's, I mean, Google, I'm trying to remember how, but I think Google is about 40 billion, 45 billion of revenue, and it's trading, last time I checked, it was about 260 billion. Yeah, so it's embarrassing, isn't it?
So when you look,
here we are at 17 billion, and we're only valued at 20.
Right, to horrendous. My point, do you, when you look at that difference in the market caps and the multiples,
I'm
the valuations
green with envy.
Do you get envious? Do you think that's right? I mean, you have 160,000 staff. They have what, 25,000?
It also tells you something.
Right. So when you look at the Google numbers, do you feel envious? Do you think there's anything that the marketing services business can learn from it in terms of efficiencies and in terms of technology?
Well, it's not about efficiencies. It's about it's about pushing on open doors or going where the opportunities are. And I think this comes back to this art and science point. And I think the real opportunities for us are increasing. You know, if you look at our strategy, it's new media, new markets, the application of technology to our business, and big data, and last but not least, horizontality, which conjures up all sorts of images in people's mind, but not the images that you're thinking about. And horizontality means getting people to work together.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
So if you take the third of them, application of technology to our business and big data, that is where the Google-type opportunity is. And if you look at our competitive set, and this is sort of more akin to WPP than it is to our direct competition. So you've got several different sets of competitors. You've got Omnicom, Publicis, IPG, Havas, Dentsu plus Aegis, if we finally see approval for that transaction. Yeah. So that's one set. The second set are obviously our research competitors like Nielsen, Ipsos, GfK. The third set is what I would call, I would call the new media owners, as I call them.
Yep.
Google, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, they're the sort of frenemies in that sense. And then the final set would be the consulting companies, IBM's, Accenture's, Deloitte's, that have got technology biases to them. So that our customers are no longer just the CMOs or the CEOs. They are the CIOs and the CTOs. So when we acquire 20% of Globant, which has 2,700 software engineers in Latin America, who are building supply-side platforms for marketeers and other parts of the organization. When we buy Salmon in the UK, which is the largest e-commerce site builder, has built the second largest e-commerce site for Argos, second only to Amazon in the UK, and a lot of retail sites. When we have our relationship with eCommerce, where we have a minority stake, which is also in the e-commerce area, that is taking us into those sorts of areas that are on the surface more productive in terms of revenue per head and profitability head.
Now you've been, obviously your support for Buddy Media paid off pretty well in 2012.
Yeah, but I was disappointed about that because
why so?
It happened too quickly because it's rather like Omniture, exactly the same. Adobe comes along and snaps up Omniture. I mean, in a way, it's a compliment, and then we have Salesforce.com doing the same with Buddy Media. I mean, the great things about those investments, we act as a strategic venture capital company, which answers the question in part about the 300 to 400 million. We invest along our strategy. I mean, today we bought a company in Canada to bolster our traditional capabilities. But that's the strategy is really built around digital and around fast-growing markets. So last week it was South Africa and mobile, and Turkey and digital. Yeah. So that would be very much where we're concentrated, and on VC type, strategic VC type investments like Omniture, like Buddy Media, like a Jewel, whatever it happens to be.
So just going back to the Buddy Media thing, you've been supportive of it, but you've always been in the press quite lukewarm about Facebook to a certain extent, but certainly more recently Twitter in terms of the quality of those platforms for your clients.
No, that's not. No, again, that's not right. If I can be so bold.
You may.
All I'm saying on Facebook is it's not an advertising medium. It's a branding medium. It's the most, you can't deny, and some people at Facebook get upset with me when I call it a branding medium, but I'm not being derogatory. That's more a compliment. Facebook's issue, if I could be so bold as to comment on that, was that it was in a very high profile, very expensive IPO. The bankers and the institutions were putting pressure on them to monetize, and they should just be relaxed. This is a marathon, not a 100-meter sprint. And they were just being put out under, Mark Zuckerberg actually, in the S1, if you read the S1 carefully, it almost looks as though he's saying, I didn't really want to go public. And there was no reason for him to do so. In fact, it was more to create a currency for people who worked inside the company. So it was undue pressure. This is an entity that has the third largest country in the planet. After China and India, it's got more than 1 billion users. It will probably become the biggest country on the planet. So just relax. But it is a great branding mechanism. So if I can get anybody to write anything decent on Facebook about this interview, which on the basis of the quality of your questioning, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
and on the basis of your answers, I am doubly sure.
Woof. No, but if I can get somebody to write something nice about you or me, we'll have done Festival of Media some good, and we'll have done WPP some good, and maybe Charlie and Martin some good as well. But having said that, you've got to look at it on the basis of long-term branding. Twitter, to my mind, is a phenomenally powerful public relations medium. Look at what happened at the Olympics. The medium, at the London Olympics, the medium that scored best was Twitter. There's no doubt about that. Facebook, I think, found it relatively difficult in the context of the Olympics. Google probably did a little bit better with search. But search, you're catching people at a very different point in the purchase cycle. Yeah. We know that 90%, I said this in the Harvard Business Review article, 90% of automobile purchases involve some form of search at some point in time in the cycle. So you catch people at the right time. And Facebook is what it is. It's a social network. It's a social interaction between people. You interrupt it at your peril. And we said this 2 or 3 years ago. We were laughed at. I think you see and hear more people talking about it in those terms. Having said that, it's immensely powerful. If you can get 1 billion people talking well about your brand and the customer experience, you go to a store in Tokyo and it was fantastic and the product was fantastic, whatever it happens to be, it's great.
Just moving into that digital realm a bit more, we'll be talking later on about real-time bidding, the programmatic revolution that's happening in advertising. How do you see the future of that? Do you feel like...
Well, our Xaxis platform, which came out of our purchase of 24/7 Real Media. Now, we couldn't afford the ticket at the table for... Oh, look, there's a movable curtain.
Shedding more light on Sir Martin Sorrell at the Festival of Media Asia.
Obviously, there's too much gloom in here. But if Google went for DoubleClick very successfully, and very expensively. Microsoft went for Avenue A, or we've now seen the Atlas platform interestingly sold to Facebook. We made our sort of poor man's bet. David Moore, who still runs 24/7 and very successfully runs 24/7 Media, as it's now called, always dislikes this comment, but this was the poor man's bet at the table. Actually, relatively, it was exactly the same relative commitment that we made to 24/7 Real Media as Google and Microsoft made in their respective transactions, relatively in terms of size. But out of that came the MIG platform, the B3 platform, and now Xaxis. That is an opt-in platform which buys online inventory across the board. We're in 19 markets now. It's extremely successful. So my view is everything you're talking about will become more and more important, and we have got to... See, this is the thing that differentiates us from our competition. We do believe that we are the intermediary. We manage a $72 billion portfolio of media, and we believe it's our responsibility to guide our clients between the media. I mean, Google, Twitter, Facebook are media owners. They're not technology companies. They're media owners masquerading as technology companies. They're just like News Corp, they're just like Viacom, they're just like CNBC, Disney, etc. And the confusion comes when you confuse, I think, that point. So we do have a role, how much clients should spend and where they should spend it.
Okay, I'm hogging you here, but let's open this up to the audience. So we have a question that's trending the highest right now on our system with 9 votes.
Sounds like trouble.
Actually, to be fair, it's a very non-specific, gentle question, which is a
Good
bit...
grief.
To be honest, you deserve to be harder on Martin.
Particularly after my comment on the quality of your question.
Yeah, totally right. Come on, ask him something really tough. But anyway, the question is, it's up here now, what is the most exciting decision we should be looking forward to from WPP this year?
I think WPP should be boring this year, actually. I think boringly successful. One of our clients, I won't say which, I asked an institution, why is it that you rate it? And they said, boringly profitable. No, I think it's more, I hate to disappoint the questioners, but it's really about more of the same. So it's more, one thing I regret about the last few years, Bricks and Next 11 are a third of our business, or 30% to be accurate. Digital is a third. I regret we haven't got more of it. So if you think worldwide weighting, it's about, actually, Bricks and Next 11 probably would be about 40%, so we're still a little bit one wing low on that, although we're much more penetrative than any of our competition. Digital, we're a third with AKQA, 32% without last year. I would say, we've said, again, target of 35 to 40, maybe. The worldwide average is 20.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're overweight. So, but I would regret, so to go back to the question, more of that, more of the application of technology, more Xaxis and Xaxis-like initiatives, more big data initiatives. By the way, big data is, people use that phrase, but it's nothing more fancy than coordinating sources of data. So taking all the data that we have $4.5 billion of income out of 17 billion, which comes from consumer insight, as we call it, market research. It's really coordinating that data and the other sources of data and having real-time dashboards that clients can use in effective ways. That's critically important. And the last thing is getting people to work more extensively together.
Obviously, you made a massive acquisition of TNS Software not that long ago. You've built quite an interesting people meter business as well. You have quite a lot of syndicated research in the business. So with big data, and this is a question reflected by many people here in the audience through the system, with all this big data, do you think that the conventional market research business are pretty defunct?
No, I don't. I mean, obviously, we've got the custom research business. I was reading Nielsen's, the transcript of Nielsen's fourth quarter when I was coming on the plane this morning, and it's clear that the custom business, because it is sort of discretionary spending, has been under pressure. Yeah. You know, they saw some of their markets down. Well, I think their custom business was down about 8% last year, which was quite high. And there has been pressure on discretionary spending. So we've seen that in the public relations business, we've seen that in the branding and identity business, and we've seen that in the custom research. The syndicated business, things like Kantar World Panel, Needscope, the copy testing, Millward Brown's copy testing and tracking, continues to grow, particularly in the fast-growing markets, in the slow growth market. But even in the slow growth markets, those syndicated businesses grow, as Nielsen has seen as well. But audience measurement is very interesting. We are the sort of, I call it the non-American Nielsen in that sense, because we do it in about 40 markets. A lot in Latin America with Ibope, a lot in Asia.
Does it feel anachronistic now, that business model?
No, because if you extend it into the new media, it's far from anachronistic. Now, the interesting thing about the new technologies, if I look at Lightspeed, which I think has 6 million consumers on it, which is our online panel, the profitability on that panel, actually the margins on that panel, surpass on our traditional business. So this is another example of where the new technologies have made existing models, even the potential, even more profitable.
Right. Okay. Back to a question, the biggest trending one currently, and it's kind of nicely links actually to the digital conversation. So many of your operating companies now, even the media agencies, are talking about themselves as content businesses.
Yeah.
Most of your clients now are considering themselves as publishers, and many of the themes over the last couple of days have reflected that. How much do you think you're in the content creation business now?
Well, I think it's a vital part of it. You know, whether it's China's Got Talent, whether it's investing in Imagina in Spain, which controls the rights to the Spanish league, La Liga, whether it's a slightly more difficult investment in the Weinstein Company, but a much more...
Why difficult?
Well, because, you know, when Wall Street meets Hollywood, Hollywood always wins. And then media rights capital, with Bruno, with Ted, with House of Cards, which was distributed on Netflix, we've invested in those things.
Invested by what do you mean? Directly as WPP or your...
Well, we have a 20% investment in Imagina, which makes those things. Does a lot of Hispanic programming. Media rights capital, has done a lot of interesting things, as I mentioned. And then you've got, so the content area, and then in a way, what we're doing with Ronaldo in Brazil on a much smaller scale, but is sort of the same thing. And we're moving into, not Ronaldo's business also manages people in the sports business. We have the rights to Pelé around the world outside Brazil in relation to the World Cup. So I think there are some things that we're doing in the content area which are very interesting. We should do more of them. We do a lot of programming. We have somebody permanently in Hollywood on the West Coast looking at what we should do, not just in new media, but in traditional media. We now have Tom Bedicari on the West Coast as well, looking after WPP Ventures. He's one of the principals in AKQA. So we're trying to do more and more of that sort of thing. I mean, it's not an easy area. I worked for Mark McCormack many, many years ago, and in the early days, McCormack would always lay off any rights payments that he had to match the revenues that were coming through. He never would take any risk. Now, of course, people take risk in these areas.
Do you see yourself, in the same way that you challenged 27 years ago, existing infrastructures in advertising, the
Yeah.
Thompsons, the Ogilvies. Do you feel that you might be the man to disrupt conventional
No, I don't think, but by the way, I don't think...
behaviors in filmmaking and TV production?
No way, no. No, not that. No,
Not tempted?
We didn't disrupt, just go back to that for a minute. We didn't disrupt. You see, when you mentioned that we acquired JWT for 525 million, the fact that we found a Japanese property that was worth 200 million helped us, but which when the company thought it was worth 30 million. That helped us, and that was luck. Ogilvy, we paid 825 million. Both those companies are worth many, many multiples of that now, either in market value or, if you were going to value it on the market in some way, shape, or form. We didn't really disrupt it. I think we, and this is really important, I think, we appreciated more than other people the value of these things. No matter what I've done or we've done to destroy value in those companies, they've survived, right? We've owned JWT since 1987 and Ogilvy from 89, and we've made mistakes. Again, another admission of failure.
You'll give us a little list of them at the end.
No, not for publication. Just admit that you do. You make mistakes, but whatever we've done, see, what those businesses have is what people who start businesses crave for. Right, so I started a business with somebody else, 2 people in one room in 1985. I remember, this is a story, Morris Saatchi trying to hire Jeremy Bullmore when he was chairman of JWT to come and work for Saatchi's. Why did Morris want that? It was actually very astute, was that JWT was classy. That didn't mean that Saatchi lacked class, but Saatchi wanted more class. And Morris understood that there's institutional strength, and let's call it entrepreneurial vitality. And the issue was not disruption. The issue was moving them in a slightly different way, such that they would be more successful, because JWT is going to celebrate its 150th anniversary next year, I think it is. So these are phenomenally strong companies, which most people who start companies will give their eye teeth for the brand recognition. Why are people attracted, and they are, to working with us, say, in the acquisition process? Because they see us, in a way, a crude way, of being a database of clients that they can tap into. And I think that's the key thing. So it wasn't quite disruption. So in relation to, you could maybe make the same analogy to the media and Hollywood side of it and the content side of it. Can we use those techniques, those established techniques and new techniques, in an evolutionary way, not revolutionary way, to get greater strength?
Okay, I'm bound. There's a question burning from the audience, so let's call it up. 14 votes from the table, which is the good old mobile question again. Every year seems to be the year of mobile. We've talked a lot about that here. Right. The theme of mobility, mobile has cropped up a lot. What's your take on mobile and where are your investments going to be?
Every year is, I think, to be fair, every year is more mobile. So my view is that the growth of smartphones means the difference. I mean, I'm not prepared to watch a football match on a mobile phone, but I know people who are, and they happen to be a little bit younger than me. And
we'll come to your age in a minute. That was my last question.
That's all there is. You save the best till last. That's all there is, I think. At the end of the day, look, whether we like it or not, this audience, I don't know what the average age of this audience is, but it's certainly on the younger side. The fact is that most media owners, most clients, most agencies are run by more mature people. Mature but not senile, let's put it like that. And as such, it's very difficult to get your mind around change. No, so why is it, so here's a question. So why is it that we know consumers spend 10% of their time on newspapers and magazines, and we know we invest, together with our clients, 20% of our media budgets? We know that consumers spend a third of their time on mobile. Mobile is a growing portion of it, and internet, and yet we only spend 20%. It takes time to change.
Isn't that because you're locked into long-term media vendor agreements?
No.
So you're getting lots of rebates?
No, that's not. That doesn't wash. Xaxis goes against that. No, that doesn't wash. Our interest, really, at the end of the day, is the whole cake. This is the point. media owners tend to be interested in their slice of the cake. You asked me about 2013 or 12 or 11. I want the cake to grow. I don't care where that growth comes from, as long as I have open access to it, as long as it's sort of open source, using open source in a different sense. Yeah. As long as I can get in, or our people can get in, fine. I don't care where it comes from. So our legacy interest is not a legacy interest because we do TV, or we do radio, or we do outdoor, or we do whatever. It's because we're interested in the whole thing. And, the demise of the advertising business and the marketing services business, when I go back to the G word, we were going to get killed. The R word, we were going to get killed. We survived. And the reason is, I think, because we do fulfill a purpose. Yeah. And we do provide value from what we do in terms of evaluating different media.
Thank you. I think I've done justice to the audience. I've got just a few seconds. And I'd like to talk, I know you hate these sort of things, but I'd like to talk a little bit
I've got to go, it's time.
Sorry
about that, it's time.
I'd like to talk a little bit about you, Martin. I mean,
me? That's a very boring subject.
Yeah, no. Well,
it's been pretty boring up to now, it's going to get worse.
Listen to you. Well, okay, your self-deprecation, that's an interesting aspect to but what I really want to talk about is you are famous for your amazing schedule, you're hectic, you cram a lot. Ajaz Ahmed, who runs the company you acquired recently, when I asked him about what question I should ask you, he said, how
so he is the source, is he?
No, only of this question. Don't do him for any of the other ones. His question was, how can you respond to emails so quickly? How do you manage to do that?
I have nothing else to do.
Anyone everywhere in the world.
I just sit there waiting for emails from Charlie Crowe.
I see you in this big office with just like screens, real-time email.
Make my day, Charlie. Send me an email.
You must have 20 PAs.
No, don't. Actually, it's very funny, actually. If somebody sends me an email and I'm not particularly interested in it, I do the courtesy, which is a mistake, actually, of writing the word thanks. And the number of times that people, when they get the thanks, write back and say, is that a robot that sent the thanks? So I write back, thanks. Which completely confounds them. They then believe there is a robot.
Now you know the brush-off from Sir Martin Sorrell.
No, it's not a brush-off. Actually, I do. There is a serious point for actually responding. There is nothing more irritating than sending somebody or making a phone call and nobody returning it. And even if it's just to acknowledge that somebody had the decency to show an interest, I think it's important. But no, I do it myself.
What do you do to relax?
Very little. I have a family, so that's one thing.
You have a puppy called Savage.
It's not a puppy. Savage is.
What kind of a name for a dog is Savage?
Well, my wife's nickname is Sauvage. So when I was courting, this is really getting very personal. So when I was courting my wife, I went to a she loves red setters. So I went to a red setter breeder. And I said, there was a set of, nine puppies. So I said, I want the best, the most complacent, So his reason he's called Savage is, one, because that's my wife's nickname, Sauvage. And number two, because he isn't.
He isn't. Okay, that's fine. Okay, final quick question. I heard last night, I learned that Vincent Bolloré has an app on his phone which counts down the days to his retirement. He's got 9 years, but he's even...
he's in Singapore today, you know that, don't you?
He is.
You know that?
I do. We tried.
It would have been fun. It would have been fun to have him here too.
Maybe next year, ladies and gentlemen. So he has the countdown app, and we know Levy has already laid the foundations for it. How long are you going to?
As long as they'll have me, Charlie. I enjoy what I'm doing. It's more fun now than it's ever been. I mean, more fun and more interesting. It has its stressful moments, but I don't believe there is such a thing as stress. It's only you're not having fun. And so no, I'll carry on as long. I own just under 2% of the company, so I'm not in the privileged position, if that's the right way of putting it, of owning 40% of the voting capital of the company. Yep. Vincent is the arch exponent of the French pyramiding. You own 51% of 51% of 51% of 51%.
which means you end up exercising control on a tremendous quantum of assets and revenues and profits with a teeny-weeny investment. He's promised me over the years that he will show me how to do that, but to date, he's not shown me the key. So the answer is I'll carry on as long as they say, Martin, take me out to the potting shed and say, Martin, shoot me in the head, or say, cheerio, you've done enough damage.
We've done enough damage here, and we've gone on for too long as well, I'm afraid. Thank you. Thank you for your questions, everybody. And can I thank you for coming to the Festival Media Age?
Anybody got any other questions? msorrell@wpp.com. And if you get the answer, thanks.
You know what happened.
You know it's a good question. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Martin Sorrell.
Thank you.
Thank you.